I've been reluctant to make a video about my experience with benzodiazepines, since it is the most difficult and painful chapter of my life. At the outset, let me say I am not a medical professional. What I am about to tell you is how I recovered, largely through my own efforts. First off, I should never have been put on alprazolam or diazepam for anxiety. These drugs are barbaric. First, benzodiazepines suppress glutamate while raising GABA levels. When you have autism, you tend to have high glutamate levels and low GABA levels to begin with. This makes withdrawing from benzodiazepines difficult, dangerous, and a protracted process once dependency has set in, which with alprazolam occurs in as little as 4 weeks of a prescribed dose. I quit benzos almost 11 years ago. I was only on them for 2.5 months, but that was long enough for my brain to be seriously damaged. My withdrawal began with massive panic attacks every time I got up and walked across the room. I lost the ability to sleep for more than 1 hour a night. The anxiety was unbearable. I had hand tremors and had to be put on a beta blocker. I passed through the acute phase of withdrawal in 14 days, but the subacute phase has been slower in lessening. I developed a protracted withdrawal syndrome, and though it has greatly weakened over the years, it still, in some sense, continues. Here's the thing. The benzos I took were for anxiety. However, these drugs also affect hypnotic GABA receptors as secondary targets. GABA A receptors are involved in every part of the brain that is connected to sleep. I lost the ability to sleep for almost 2 years, and it was not until I was put on gabapentin that I was able to repair my sleep. I also discovered later on that the more fat I ate, the better I felt. There is research to support the idea that those with autism have impaired cholesterol pathways in their brains. And where you find the most cholesterol in the brain are where you will find GABA A receptors. Cholesterol appears to function as a positive modulator on GABA A receptors, very similar to benzodiazepines and alcohol, except without the peril of addiction. I discovered the link between autism and GABA A receptors by accident. Shortly after I was put on gabapentin, I was also put on a statin drug to lower my LDL cholesterol. All the progress I made on gabapentin was erased in a matter of days. Once I discontinued the statin drug, my progress returned within 24 hours. I determined that my autistic brain likely made just-in-time GABA to meet its needs. And anything that lowers cholesterol will have adverse effects on GABA levels in my brain. Gabapentin replaced benzos for me, but not by raising GABA levels. Gabapentin is a GABA analog. That is, it is modeled on the GABA molecule, but it does not fit into the GABA A receptors. Instead, it interferes with glutamate activity. Here is the good thing about gabapentin. It produces no active metabolite and has a half-life of only 5 hours. Since my withdrawal syndrome chiefly involves my sleep, that means I only need a single dose of the pill. A 600 milligram tablet dissolves slowly in my stomach while I sleep, and by the time I enter REM sleep, it is on the wane. I experience no interdose withdrawal from gabapentin because it is out of my system by late morning. Glutamate is a very stimulating neurotransmitter, but paradoxically, it is also highly involved in sleep. Glutamate, produced in the hypothalamus, tells the pineal gland to produce melatonin. Glutamate is also highly involved in REM sleep, and this is where my withdrawal syndrome is especially bad. My dream sleep was horrible for years. It was like being trapped inside a coma with high anxiety. As it turns out, every time my glutamate levels shot up, even naturally, as during sleep, my brain freaked out and thought I was going back into an acute benzo withdrawal. In other words, I developed a post-traumatic stress disorder triggered by naturally rising glutamate levels in my brain. Before I was put on gabapentin, I discovered that I could take melatonin as a supplement, which relieved pressure on my brain to make melatonin. Melatonin did nothing to spare me the ravages of glutamate during my REM sleep. Only gabapentin had a positive effect. Gabapentin lowers glutamate across the board. This makes my late sleep shallow and my REM sleep watery. This is similar to the kind of poor sleep you have when you drink alcohol or while taking benzodiazepines. There is less melatonin, for one thing. As time has gone along, and unrelated to these concerns, I developed a B12 vitamin deficiency, so I had to start taking a supplement. Over the course of 2 months, my sleep became more shallow, and my REM sleep disappeared. However, I experienced no negative effects of glutamate and did not suffer for less sleep. Weirdly, vitamin B12 is extremely effective at lowering glutamate levels, and when combined with gabapentin, too much glutamate is being sacrificed. It is a tricky situation to manage my glutamate levels and prevent them from crashing. But I have learned about the role of glutamate in my life as an autistic person and how to manage it. I researched gabapentin as a solution to my withdrawal situation and was put on it by a doctor without any consultation from me. Before this happened, I was put on an antidepressant, which is an inappropriate treatment for benzo withdrawal. Still, I wound up on mirtazapine, which is a sedative serotonin adrenergic antidepressant. It did help with my anxiety and a little bit with my sleep. To be honest, I have derived no antidepressant effect from a serotonin antidepressant. It is more likely that autistics derive antidepressant effects from dopamine and glutamate than serotonin. Where serotonin is linked to empathy and a sense of social well-being, dopamine and glutamate are more linked to fulfilling actions and projects, which may explain why autistics have such a high level of concentration for the stuff that interests them. Autistics are made quite giddy by high levels of glutamate. If you've ever been to a Chinese buffet restaurant where they spike the food with MSG, then you will know how happy glutamate can make you feel. While I was undergoing the misery of my subacute phase of my benzo withdrawal, I was never depressed. In fact, I was often elated and with the euphoria I had not experienced since childhood. So when you have autism, glutamate can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. When my glutamate levels crash, which is more common these days, I will experience a form of depression. Interest in my projects will drop. My energy level drops, and my sleep becomes more shallow. I can counteract these problems by eating aged cheese, vinegar, English peas, and other foods high in glutamate. But you have to be careful. Aspartame, found in most diet sodas as a sweetener, drives up glutamate levels significantly and rapidly, so much so that the excitatory effect makes aspartame as addictive as caffeine. When I used to drink diet soda a lot, I was always thirsty. I was constantly sipping a soda to get my fix of glutamate. I did not work this out until many years later when I developed my problems with glutamate. You need to maintain healthy brain connectivity for these neurotransmitters, so you need omega-3. I prefer the plant-based form of omega-3, but I can only take 400 milligrams a day. When my glutamate levels are too high, anxiety is the first warning sign. Stress, a rekindling of my acid reflux, and sleep disruption follow. I can take more B12, which is fast-acting, or I can take magnesium glycinate, which is also fast-acting, but of shorter duration of action than vitamin B12. Once you have built up B12 in your body, it is like a slow-moving barge. This is why you have to manage course corrections very carefully. Eventually, I would like to withdraw from my gabapentin, and B12 might help me do that. But I do not know how much glutamate is being suppressed by gabapentin, or how much my glutamate levels will rebound once it is removed. I may need to take gabapentin for the rest of my life.